Don't pay the sticker price either when you're purchasing an automobile or when you're purchasing Louisiana. Exactly 200 years ago this year, the Louisiana Purchase nearly doubled the size of the United States. By any measure, it was one of the largest land transactions in history, involving an area larger than all of today's Europe, including France, Germany, and the Low Countries, Spain and Portugal, and Great Britain as well. That's how big it is. It was eventually all parts of 15 western states would be carved out of its nearly 830,000 square miles, which stretched from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada, from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. And in retrospect, the price of $15 million, or about 4 cents an acre, was a real bargain. According to one author, who co-authored a book with Stephen Ambrose, he wrote, quote, "The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Louisiana Purchase are the three elements which created the modern United States of America." Let me give you a little history. The Louisiana Territory was born in 1682 when a French explorer by the name of Robert La Salle put up a cross near the mouth of the Mississippi River and solemnly read a declaration to a group of bemused Indians. Imagine the Indians are sitting there winking at each other and poking at each other in the wrist as he get him. So he's saying that all of the Mississippi Valley belongs to France, and he named the area Louisiana after he said, his great king Louis XIV of France. It just sat there after that. And 36 years later, in 1718, another French explorer came out, John Lemoyne, his name was. He founded a little settlement there at the spot where La Salle had placed the cross, and he named it for his pal, Philip, Duke of Orleans, New Orleans. But it still didn't go anyplace. Throughout the entire 18th century, the Louisiana Territory had only scattered French. You know, the French owned it for a while, but they didn't care about it. They didn't put anybody out there. They didn't put fur trappers out. So it was a few scattered French in New Orleans, a few German settlements around St. Louis, and of course, the Acadians, that is, the French Canadians, who had fled from Canada after the French and Indian War, and naturally a lot of Native Americans and a few American-born frontiersmen, or guys who would go over the border, over the Mississippi, to look for pelts. The next French king after Louis XIV, Louis XV, he's the guy that said, "After me the deluge," and he has a guy that has his great mistress, Madame Pompadour, but he was going broke fast. And he said, "I tell you what, you tell me about Louisiana." And they said, "Well, it's nothing there." And he said, "Fine, get rid of it. I don't want it." He gave it away. He literally gave it away to his Spanish Bourbon cousin, Charles III of Spain. So he just gave it to the Spanish. Napoleon takes over France in 1798. He wanted it back right away. Our president by 1801 is Thomas Jefferson, and he finds out that France actually now owned it again. The secret treaty, France owns it again. It bothers Jefferson very much because he knows that France is going to keep the Americans in the western states. Those are states bordering the Mississippi, like Kentucky, like Tennessee. We did a lot of Congress on the Mississippi River. Once the goods get to New Orleans, France won't let them go by unless they pay a huge tariff. So, sure enough, by 1801, there's a proclamation which said all American merchandise could no longer be stored in New Orleans warehouses. As a result, the fur pelts, the agricultural produce, the finished goods risked getting rained on and being stolen on open wharfs while awaiting shipment to the East Coast. This would really hurt the entire economy of Americans' western territories. Jefferson is suddenly concerned. Now, Jefferson, as you must know, had been a Francophile all his life. He loved the French. My gosh, he spent 14 years of his life living in and around Paris. But he did not trust Napoleon. So he wrote to the United States Minister to Paris, Robert Livingston, that it was crucial that the port of New Orleans remain open for American commerce, and that the United States was willing to buy New Orleans if it had to, and let the French know that we're willing to buy the city and the port of New Orleans if we have to. So Livingston gets the message. He approaches the French minister in Paris, a man by the name of Talleyrand. Now, Talleyrand is a politician, you must understand. He was a politician who was so crooked that when he died, they had to screw him into the ground. This guy was a terrible liar. And so Talleyrand naturally denied everything. He denied France owner. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. We wouldn't stop anybody from using New Orleans. He just was one of those things that he was in the habit of doing, which is lying. So Livingston, who was probably an inexperienced diplomat anyway, what Livingston was a Hudson River aristocrat, just was baffled. He said, oh, you can't do business with these people. They don't know what, they won't tell you the truth. But then Livingston did warn Jefferson in the next letter. He said, Napoleon is preparing to send 5,000 troops from France's Caribbean colony of Haiti to occupy New Orleans. Bad news. But it didn't happen because the French army in Haiti was getting clobbered, not only by yellow fever, but by the insurgent rebellion that was going on, led by an escaped slave by the name of Toussaint L'Ouverture, who built this great citadel up above Port-au-Prince. Now, anybody with any common sense who knew anything about the politics of colonial empires knew that once the United States of America had overthrown Great Britain's colonial empire, every other colonial empire was going to fall as well. It's easy to do. Haiti was the second one after the United States. But the lesson is simply this. You cannot control an overseas empire as the mother country when they don't want you there. And you cannot maintain a big enough army to hold down an insurrection 4,000 miles away. You can't. And so one by one, the colonial powers were overthrown. But it's a lesson that we, the United States of America, had to learn 200 years later in 50,000 American deaths to find out in Vietnam. So Napoleon begins to find out that he can't hold Haiti. He said, we can't even hold Haiti with 5,000 troops. How are we going to hold 830,000 square miles with any troops? Not only that, we don't trust the Indians because they tended to steal and to burn villages, and we don't trust the American settlers who are crossing over there, squatters, if you will, and we just, they're coming over to grab our land, and we don't have enough soldiers to do it. So with that, he was told, he approaches Talleyrand. In the meantime, Jefferson had told James Monroe, former member of Congress, former governor of Virginia, and of course, eventually future president of the United States, to go over and join Livingston in Paris and help him out to make some decisions. By the time Monroe arrives in Paris, the situation has changed. Napoleon suddenly decided to sell the entire Louisiana territory to the United States, outright like that. Napoleon told Talleyrand to send out feelers to Monroe and Livingston. What's more, Napoleon was planning at this time an entirely new war against Great Britain, and he needed funds for build his new navy. After all, it's only 2 years. 1805 is going to be the Battle of Trafalgar, the great sea battle between Britain and Napoleon's navy. So he's going to need money in a hurry. This is a good time to sell it. We need money. So on April 11th of 1803, Livingston called in Talleyrand for one of those routine, another one of those futile attempts to deal with the foreign minister about the port of New Orleans. Talleyrand suddenly, he has a little